Hey there! Today's lesson we can summarize it with two very nice quotes, one of them by former world champion Emanuel Lasker, who said that when you see a good move, look for a better one. Another very nice quote by German master Siegbert Tarrasch goes, when you see a good move, sit on your hands and see if you can find a better one. So what I'm going to talk about today is what we call intermediate moves. They're also called in-between moves, or the German word Zwischenzug is very often used. And these are moves that are played instead of playing the expected move. So let's evaluate a few positions to understand this idea more clearly. I'm going to start with simpler positions and then I'm going to move on to more complicated positions. In this position it is white to play, black in the previous move took on c4, and here most of us would immediately recapture the pawn, either with the king or with the pawn, for example after b takes e4, and here black would capture this pawn on b2. In this particular position, this ending is still winning for white with correct play, but white still has a lot of work to do. White has two extra pawns, and this should normally lead to a win. But instead of playing the expected move, taking on c4, here white played the very strong intermediate move, king to c2, attacking the rook. So intermediate moves are normally going to be very forcing. Here we have an attacking move. Checks are also very common, as we'll see. And now black has to move the rook, for example after rook to h1. Here black actually resigned, but the game could have continued something like rook to h1, and then white would simply capture, and now white has 3 extra pawns, and this conversion is going to be a lot easier. That's why black decided to resign after king to c2. So in this particular position, the intermediate move king to c2 was stronger than taking on c4, and here white got a larger advantage. In any case, after taking on c4 directly, white should normally win, but as we see very often, intermediate moves can mean the difference between getting a decisive advantage or simply not getting any advantage at all. So let's move on to the next position. Here it is black to play. White has an advantage. This pass pawn on c6 is actually quite strong. So black should have played king to c8, preparing to block this pawn with a move like bishop to d8. Instead, black captured the knight on c4, expecting white to take on c4, and then go king to c7, planning to take this very strong pass pawn on c6. White would still have an advantage here after bishop takes c6, knight to d8, attacking the pawn. White can take another pawn, and then after knight takes c6, we get this position where white has an extra pawn, but the conversion might take a lot of time, assuming that white is winning. But instead, after bishop takes c4, before taking on c4, white played the very strong bishop to b6, giving a check, and here black actually resigned. The point is that after king takes and bishop takes, now black cannot capture the pawn on c6 easily, and now there's the idea to go either bishop to a6 or bishop takes e6. So the game is pretty much over. Here black could have tried bishop to d8 with the idea to block the pawn, but after bishop takes and king to b8, here instead of taking the knight on f7, white has a stronger move, which again is an intermediate move. If white takes on f7, black would capture the bishop on b6, but white can force an exchange after c7, giving a check and attacking the bishop, and after bishop takes and king takes, bishop takes f7, white ends up a piece up, and this is going to be a fairly easy win for white. So let's move on to the next position. Here it is black to play. Black is a pawn down, but black has very active pieces. Black might even have ideas to attack the king on g1. And here black also has the very strong bishop to a6, which will pick up the rook, attacking the rook. And here white goes knight to d3, preventing this idea. White has this very strong queen to g3, attacking the pawn on g2, which is pinned. And after g3 and knight to g4, white's position is simply falling apart. That's why white decided to go f3, one idea being to play rook to f2, covering g2, but on the other hand, black has the option to take the rook on f1, which most of us would probably do it straight away. So after bishop takes f1 and king takes, black gets an exchange for a pawn. This is still good for black, but on the other hand, now it's going to be harder to attack white's king, and white might have ideas to go e4. For example, if black plays any move like king to h8, after e4, white might have ideas to go knight to c2, knight to e3, bring a knight to f5. This is still better for black, but here the conversion might take time and very accurate play. Actually, after bishop takes and king takes, e4 is a move that keeps a clear advantage for black, so black has to find very precise moves to keep a large advantage. But instead of taking on f1, black played the very strong intermediate move bishop to c4, attacking the queen, still keeping the idea of taking the rook on f1, and here white actually resigned because the queen doesn't have any good squares to go. The king has to go to the c file, a4 is covered by the queen, so after a move like queen to c2, now black will capture the rook on f1, creating a discover attack against the queen, so black is winning a full rook in this line, so the position is just desperate for white. So let's move on to a very instructive position. Here white could take the bishop on c6, which is a very strong piece, but black can simply take on e4, either with the rook or with the queen, and we have a fairly balanced position. That's why before taking the bishop, white played the very strong intermediate move knight to d6. Again, here is an attacking move, because it will attack the rook on e8. By the way, here the move knight to f6 is another interesting intermediate move, but in this case, black can deal with this idea of having the rook and the bishop attacked by simply moving the rook on e8. For example, after rook to e6, rook to c8 was also possible. Black is simply defending the bishop and even attacking the knight, so white is not getting anything here. So after knight to d6, white attacks the rook, and rook to c8 is not possible because the knight is eyeing the c8 square. So here black tried the move rook to e6, the bishop on c6 is attacked. If black moves the bishop, then after knight takes and rook takes, white is a clear exchange up. But black tried an interesting idea, which is rook to e6. And after queen takes e6, white is a piece up, but the idea is to follow up with rook to d8, pinning this knight. But white saw further and played a very nice knight takes f7. Black resigned here. The point is that after queen takes, white is giving a check and attacking the rook, so black has to take. And here white has this very strong move, queen to c1, giving a check, and then white will capture on the 8. For example, after king to g7, rook takes, white ends up being a rook up. Now let's move on to the last position. Here the victim is none other than former world champion and legendary player Mikhail Tal. Here white is a rook down, but white has the option to trade queens and then take the rook. White will end up being a pawn up. This should normally be a winning position because white has these 3 pawns against 1 pawn on the queen side. White should normally push the pawns and win, but it will take a lot of time and energy. So the idea of finding intermediate moves can very often save us a lot of time to be in better shape to play the next game. So here, instead of going for this queen trade and then taking the rook, white played the very strong intermediate move queen takes h6, capturing another pawn, and now the idea is to take the pawn on g5, so black is in no time to move the rook, because after bishop takes, the king doesn't have any squares to go, so after queen to f6 and queen takes, we get a checkmate. So black tried a very interesting move, worthy of a former world champion, bishop to e5, and now playing the very natural bishop takes g5 is actually not very good, because after king to d6 and bishop takes, black has this very nice move, queen to a7, forking the king and the bishop. But white instead captured with the queen on g5. Bishop takes a8 was also an alternative, but queen takes g5 is another very strong intermediate move because white wins another pawn. And after king to d6 and bishop takes, now black doesn't have the move queen to a7 because the bishop is on e3. So black's position is actually quite bad. Black could already resign here, and in fact black resigned after just a few moves. Here black made a blunder after queen to c7, queen takes e5. Now here black resigned because after king takes e5, bishop to c4, after the king moves, white will collect the queen and end up being a piece up, in addition to having 3 extra pawns. So I hope that you can incorporate this more advanced tactic in your game. They very often mean the difference between winning or drawing or even winning or losing a game. If you want to improve further at chess, I have a free course that will provide you with a daily improvement plan for that. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.